Good morning, everyone. Welcome to LisaBug Yoga for hips and hands in the month of April 2024. We're using an optional stress ball or some kind of small ball that has some give to it to strengthen the hands, focusing on hands, wrists, and forearm strengthening as well as mobility of the wrists and fingers. So have that off to the side and ready. And then we're going to start, and I want you to pick the position that it's going to feel best for you to begin. You can sit in a chair, you can sit down on the floor, or you can stand with me as we focus on our breathing a little bit to begin to center this morning, or whenever you're watching this class, maybe later on YouTube. So just find a really nice, strong posture, whether you're seated or standing, and just place one hand right on the lower belly. And I just want you to begin by doing some belly breathing. So when we breathe in with our belly breathing, the belly expands forward. So we inhale, the belly moves in towards your hand, and then we exhale and the belly draws back in toward the spine. So just practice that a bit and notice how we can send the air down through the nose, through the lungs, and we can expand this lower portion of our belly. So this is our belly breath. Let's just do 2 more of those. And then relax that hand down. So I had some requests from Esther to revisit bucket handle breathing. So what I want you to visualize in your mind, if you reach down to grab a bucket that had handles on either side, as you picked it up, the handles would go out as you carried the bucket. So this is what our rib cage is going to duplicate. So let's put the hands right on the ribs, and you can kind of feel this portion of your ribs that dials down, and the pinky fingers may be at that lowest rib. So now, as we breathe out, I want you to expand so that your hands are actually going to move away from, as you breathe in, your hands are going to expand away from each other. And you can kind of see where my fingertips are here. So we'll breathe in. And notice how my fingers came apart. And then we breathe out. And they come back towards each other. And breathe in. And breathe out. So much different breath. The belly is not expanding outward. The rib cage is floating out and in. You might notice you can get more air into your lungs as you create that space right into the rib cage. Now try a few without your hands as a little bit of biofeedback. So just bring your arms by your side. Flare the rib cage out and then retract. So if I had a measuring tape around your rib cage, when you're breathing in, this should measure more inches, and then when you breathe out, less inches circumference of your rib cage. And as we do this later on in class, if you need to go back and place your hands here, you can do that as well, just to make sure you're getting that breathing correctly. Let's do 2 more bucket handle breaths. And 1 more, deep inhalation. And exhale. So oftentimes when we just breathe normally, our breath is really shallow. It's here in the chest. We're not getting a maximum breath in. Sometimes we're not breathing all the way out. So we can use these accessory muscles in the rib cage to help us to take that deeper breath. That's really going to accentuate some of our poses today. All right, so I'd like for you to have something that you can hold for balance next to the right side of your body. We're just going to stand on the right foot and pick up the left knee. So we're going to do a pendulum movement with this left leg. So I want you to watch. My knee is not going to move. The upper thigh is going to stay right where it is, but I'm going to do a pendulum swing, bringing the leg across, and then see how far you can take it out. And just go nice and slow, out and in. So what we're doing is working on rotation of the femur. That's this big bone in the upper leg. We're rotating it out and in, internal and external rotation, while our hip is in flexion. Now, if you really want to challenge yourself and try a couple of these by just balancing, that's great. But our main focus right now is on this hip action. So don't worry if you can't hold your balance and do it. Just use that chair or wall just a little bit. I just want you to kind of be aware, what is the range of motion? Can you go further in than you can go out? For most of us, that is true. But I also want you to be able to compare sides when we get to the other side here. Now, the next time we come in with the pendulum, see if you can set that foot right above the knee on the other side, and then just use this hip muscle to press your knee out. Now, if your leg is down here, this is okay too. It's mostly about what the hip is doing. And then let's see if we can balance here. So this is kind of a modification of our tree pose. All right, let's relax that down and rest. Now, just so I balance my sides, I'm going to bring my chair to the other side. You could turn around if you want, but I want to stay facing forward so you can see the other side. Okay, so now standing on the left foot. We'll pick up that right knee, and it's somewhere around 90 degrees, doesn't have to be perfect. Really tall posture, and let's bring that foot across. Now notice my leg isn't going out like this, so I want your leg to stay right in place, and then the other direction. So for me, and right off the bat, I can tell my range of motion in this hip is so much better than the other one, which I'm getting some arthritis in the other side hip. So it's really made a difference in my mobility. And I've been speaking to my physical therapist about that, and he said, you want to maintain the range you have. Try as best as you can to work through that range of motion you have, as long as it's pain-free, so that you don't lose any more of that range of motion. If you want to try a couple by balancing, kind of focus, what are the muscles that I'm activating here as I'm doing this rotation? See if you can kind of pinpoint where you're feeling the action. All right, next time you swing the foot to the midline, see where you can place that foot, and just let this knee open. Again, it can be down here, it can even be on the floor. And then decide whether you want to try balancing on this side. You should have some muscle action right back in the back of this hip here, because you're trying to push the knee out. So to some degree, this is a modification of standing pigeon. All right, let's bring it down and relax. Okay, my chair's going over to the other side. So that action of rotating that knee in its position, we're going to do later in class on our back, and we're also going to do that from a hands and knees position. So just kind of keeping that in your brain, what we just worked on there. Now, if you've got your stress ball, let's go ahead and pick that up. And then take your feet into a nice wide stance, toes turned out. Take a nice big breath in, press the palms of the hands together, and draw the thumbs down in. So we're just going to press into that ball a little bit. And if you don't have a stress ball, just press the palms of your hands together. So I want to see what kind of mobility you have keeping this position with your arms, the mobility to lower your elbows down and then to raise your elbows up. Of course, down is kind of easy. Up is harder, and that depends on what the range of motion you have in your wrists is. And lift and lower. Keeping some pressure in on the hands, keeping the shoulder blades down, the abs really engaged. We'll go down and up twice more. And then can you imagine what we're going to add here? Yes, you're right. I'm going to add bucket handle breathing. So when your elbows are down, you're exhaling. When those elbows come out, I want you to flare your ribs. Funnel them back in. Flare them out. Expand the rib cage. So we're in flexion of the wrists here. The ribs are out. Coming back into a pretty flat wrist. 2 more. One more. Flare the ribs. Funnel in. And relax. The ball goes in your right hand. We'll turn this right foot out toward this side of your mat and then slightly turn the left foot in. Let's come into a warrior 2 stance. So as much as we can, we want to bring this knee to line up right toward the center of the foot, right over the heel. This leg, we're feeling a little bit of opening here through the hip flexor, tighten the glute, extend the arms out, turn your palms up. We are going to squeeze the ball and release. Now, if the arms need to be lower for your shoulders, that's great, no worries. Squeeze and release. Now, next time as you squeeze the ball, shift into our sun warrior or reverse warrior, still squeezing the ball, looking up. Come back down as you're releasing. And squeeze, take it up. And release the tension. This hand can be also on the hip. Squeeze as you bring it up. Release. You can take the free hand behind your back. Squeeze. And release. Let's get 3 more of these. Now, nothing is changing in the position of your lower body. You're really nice and firm through the hips and thighs. We're in a side bend for our core. You should be feeling some work in the hand, up into the forearm. Hold this one at the top. Either hold the squeeze of the stress ball or squeeze, release, squeeze, release. Maybe a bucket handle breath. One more breath in, deep. Exhale, come back down. Relaxing the upper body. Switch the stance of your feet, turning that right foot inward, the left toes out. Switch the ball into the left hand. Find your warrior 2 stance. Drop your shoulder blades down. Turn both palms up. And then we'll squeeze and release. And you can do this at any pace you'd like to go. Noticing if this is a weaker hand, if you feel like you might have some arthritis, maybe in fingers, thumbs. And then we'll shift into reverse warrior as the squeeze happens, and then releasing to come back down. Now it's kind of my tendency to inhale when my body expands and exhale when it comes back to normal, but you can do the reverse of that as well. And then we've got our options here with the right hand can go to the hip. If you're struggling with balance looking up, you don't have to look up toward the hand. We can take that free hand behind the back. It's a nice stretch for the anterior shoulder or deltoid. And you're squeezing that stress ball with any tension that works good for you. And if you don't have the ball, just make a fist and then open your hands. Let's hold this one at the top, and you can maintain an isometric squeeze, or you can squeeze release. Perhaps a couple bucket handle breaths. Maintaining that nice solid stance in the lower body, good foundation in your reverse warrior. One more breath. Exhale, come back up, and relax the upper body. Nicely done. All right, let's set the ball off to the side. We'll take a nice big deep breath in. Exhale and swan dive down into a forward bend. And then I'm just going to give you maybe about a minute to do anything that feels good here for you. You might just like to hang and hold the stretch or move your head around a little bit. You can bend one knee and the other, just kind of shift from side to side. You could be up here, hands on the thighs a little bit, hands on your chair, yoga block, any props. And just notice how your hands are feeling, the forearms, the wrists. Just a couple more breaths here. And then take your time to come up. You can either round your back and roll up, or you can place your hands to your hips and take a nice flat neutral spine and just pull the spine back up. Turn that right foot back out, the left foot parallel as we come back into our warrior two pose. Now, as we take our hands to our hips here, this is one option, pulling the elbows back. So what I want you to do is to get a nice stretch through the front of your shoulders. If you'd like to add variations, you can grab your yoga strap, hold it behind your back, or you can interlace your hands together behind your back and lift your arms any amount up from the back body. Now, maybe today for you, you feel best to stay upright. Your option is to bow into humble warrior. So we will bring the body down toward the inside of that right knee, lowering down any amount. Feel a nice stretch. You should feel that in the upper portion of your hamstring, in your hip. If that's too much for a stretch and you have hands behind the back, just let it go. Maybe hands back on the hips. One more breath here. You might feel it difficult to do a bucket handle breath in this position. Okay, take your time to come back up. Push down into that right foot. Send the upper body lifted. And then relax the clasp of the hands. We'll shift into the other side, pivoting the right foot, turning out the left. finding your nice warrior two stance. And in the stance, we have a straight line that comes from the front heel through the arch of the back heel. So again, hands can be at hips with shoulders back, elbows back, grab your yoga strap behind you, or interlace your hands. And if you interlace your hands, I challenge you to do it the opposite way from what you did before. So opposite thumb on top. We can stay up. So you can be here through that whole pose, or let's try to bow down into our humble warrior. So your left shoulder's coming down toward the inside of your left thigh or knee, any amount. The arms can keep lifting from the back body. Your abdominals are scooped in. And we breathe. One more nice generous breath. Then push down into that left foot, send your body back up. And release the clasp of the hands. Go ahead, turn both feet back in. So we're going to have the opportunity to come down onto our knees. So if you need a little bit of a cushion or padding for your knees, Joyce got this really cool cushion over at Marshall's. Just going to put the plug in for Marshall's. Have you got your cushion, Joyce? Okay, I just have my handy blanket. So what we're going to do is turn back to the right. And then you can do the same pose, humble warrior, if you want to stay up on your feet and not come down to the floor. Otherwise, we're just going to reach down and drop the knee down to the mat, that back knee. And then I want you to take a bigger step forward with this front leg and slightly out to the upper corner of your mat. So I just widened my feet so they're up on that angle toward the corner. We're going to see if we can bring our hands down right here into the center. Now your chair can come in really handy right here to support. It's great. Or your yoga blocks. Now if you like coming down here, but it's just really challenging for your knee, you can tuck this back toe under and lift your knee up off the mat. This is absolutely fine. All right, so in yin yoga, this is our dragon pose. And we are getting two really nice opposing stretches in our hip. We're getting the back legs, getting the hip flexor here. We want to tighten up the glute muscle. In the front leg, we're getting a little bit more of the glute and upper hamstring. So I'm going to give you about, another 45 seconds to stay here in this pose and just to dial it up the way you want. You can maybe come down a little deeper towards your elbows. You can also turn the front toes out and let your knee open up out to the side. That's a nice little stretch. Your bucket handle breath might be difficult in this position, but you can give it a go a couple times or come into the belly breath. And just only 10 seconds here. All right, you might be saying, okay, Lisa, how do I get out of this to the other side? I'm going to leave that up to you because we all have a little bit different challenges in our body. So what I'm going to do is tuck this back toe under, lift my knee up off the mat, and I'm going to walk my hands around to the other side. But for you, you might just come to both knees and step the other foot forward. Okay, here's that surgical knee. So we're going to see how much pressure we can take there. Not too bad. Okay, remember you can do this standing up. So maybe you're just doing your humble warrior again. Or we can walk this foot out to the upper corner of the mat. And you want a big step forward. So this knee is behind the hip. And this foot might be a little bit out ahead of the knee. And then let's see where we can take it on this side. All right. So after knee replacement, ooh, this knee is definitely tender right here. So I'm going to try tucking that toe under, lifting my knee up just to give it a break. We do what we can with what we have, and it might not be the same from one side to the other. So I want you guys to keep that in mind as you're doing this stretch. So take any variations that work best for you here in Dragon. Maybe turn that front foot out. You can let the knee drift open a little bit, opening up the hip a little bit deeper. And maybe about 30 seconds left on this side. Just a really nice hip opener on both legs. Maybe one or two more breaths. And then we are going to come to our hands and knees here. So whichever way works best for you, you might want to push into your hands and slide the front foot back into maybe a down dog really briefly. Or just drop one knee to the floor, pull the other knee in, and take a child's pose. So now in your mind, I want you to visualize that pendulum swing we did when we were standing in balance. We'll be doing that from the hands and knees. So coming up to all fours, and if your wrists are tender here, you can make fists for wrists and straighten out the wrist joint. Find that nice neutral spine, and then take your right leg straight back behind you, bend your knee about 90 degrees, and we are going to pendulum swing our foot. So now we're not in hip flexion anymore like we were when we were standing up because we had our knee lifted. We're pretty much in a neutral hip. So the knee and the upper leg are going to stay where they are, and you're going to take your right foot out to the side and then in toward your other leg. So I'm doing that hip that has some arthritis in it. So my movement is not very big here. So you're just rotating out and in with the foot. So since we're doing this in a different position, the muscles are working differently. We're using our glute and our hamstring to keep that leg up. Where when we were standing, we were using our hip flexor to keep the leg up. Now, if you'd like to take your left hand off the floor, do this in spinal balance. That'll give you a little extra focus on the core and focus on our balance. Let's go out and in one more time. Then right back to neutral with the foot. Hand comes down, leg extends long, and then we'll bring that knee in. You might need a rest for a second, maybe come down to the elbows or take a child's pose, or stretch out your right wrist because you've been on that hand for a little bit longer if you lifted the left arm off the floor. Okay, this is going to look a lot different for me on the other side. Let's give it a go. Come back to your all fours. Take your left leg back. Bend your knee so your foot is up toward the ceiling, and you're just going to lock that left upper leg in place as you take your foot out to the side and then rotate it in. Well, that's interesting. This is definitely a greater range of motion for me on this side, but not as much as I thought. It's always an experiment, isn't it? It's a learning process with our body every single day, especially as the clock ticks. Now we can try the right hand off the floor. Hey, I just realized I did the other side with my surgical knee down and I didn't even think about it. It did not cross my mind. That's a good sign. Make sure you're breathing, maybe a bucket handle breath. And let's go out and in one more time. Back to neutral. Leg extends, hand can come down. And then we'll bring both knees down to the mat. Maybe a child's pose, or perhaps you'd like to press up into a down dog. Stretch the backs of the legs a little bit. Okay, we are going to transition to our Z-sit position, and I really enjoy using a blanket for this to elevate my hip. So I'm just going to come on to, it'll be for you, the left hip. You can do either side first, so that's okay. And I'm going to put this hip up on a blanket and come to Z-sit. Now your body, unless you're really flexible in your hips, is probably going to be angled this way a little bit. Some of you might be flexible enough that you can completely balance your hips. No worries either way. I'm not balanced, so having this hip on a blanket really works well for me. So let's take the left hand out to the side and a breath in. Pull that hand back and try to rotate your chest up to the ceiling. Take a bucket handle inhale. And then as you exhale that bucket handle breath, reach the top hand underneath, look behind you. Oh boy, that twist feels great. Bucket handle inhale, open. Exhale, cinch up the rib cage. And again, reach. We'll do 2 more of these for a total of 5 or whatever number you get. You've got a little bit of pressure on that wrist, but you can lift up some of the body weight out of your hand if that's feeling uncomfortable. And then we'll just lift that hand up and hold. Make a soft fist, or you can even grab your ball, and I want you to make wrist circles. Maybe 5 or 6 one direction, and then reverse. And then lower that down. So from here, we are going to either do modified pigeon or full pigeon on the floor. So for modified, I'm just going to walk my chest over this front knee and lower myself down over that leg any amount. If you'd like to come into full pigeon, if you have the room behind you, you can just slide this leg straight back. Because of the wall behind me, I'm going to have to turn my body over to the side a little bit to be able to straighten that leg behind me and come into my full pigeon. And then we can lower this down. So I'm going to stay with modified on this side because my surgical knee is not going to like that quite so much. Okay, so I have a clock in front of me. 2 minutes, starting now. Now, if neither one of these is working for you, you know that you can do this sitting in your chair. You can roll over onto your back. You can do a figure 4 stretch. But hopefully, most of us should be able to do this modified in some way. But give yourself permission to switch it up. So we're moving into those deep external rotators of the hip. stretching the piriformis, gemellus, which sometimes is helpful if we tend to experience some sciatic nerve issues, really tight hips. You have 1 more minute. Bucket handle breath might be hard if you're really folded forward in this pose. If you're upright, it might be pretty easy to work on that. Now, do we want to push this to a place of pain? No. Remember, Patanjali said yoga should be comfortable. So we want to feel a nice gentle stretch. But sometimes we can call it slight discomfort if we're really deep into that stretch, but not pain. Last 10 seconds here in our pose. And then I'll give you time to bring yourself out of that pose and to come into your Z-sit on the other side. So take your time to get there. If you're using the blanket like I am, it's going to come over to the other hip. And that just lifts that hip up a little bit so that when you sit in Z-sit, you can be a little bit more upright. This is the hip that gives me problems, so I am feeling that in there a little bit. So I'm going to keep my body at an angle here. Okay, if you're ready with me, right hand comes to the floor. We'll lift the left arm, rotate back, open up the heart, take a nice big bucket inhale, flare your ribs out, and then reach under, exhaling completely. Try to look behind your body. Now you could certainly be doing this, the free hand, with your stress ball as well, maybe doing some squeeze and release. Or last week we did some finger pinches where we pinched the thumb and the index finger into the stress ball, then the middle finger, the ring finger, the baby finger. So you can always bring back some of those things we've done in previous classes, interject those into your practice today. I think this is number 4. One more gives us 5 or thereabouts. And then we hold up, we make a soft fist, or we take hold of our stress ball, give it a little squeeze, and then let's rotate the wrist. Maybe about 6 or so times one way. And reverse. And then release it down. Okay, our modified pigeon. We just take our chest over this leg, and there's about maybe a little bit more than a 90-degree bend here, but you can adjust this bend in your knee as much as you need. We walk the hands forward. Now, what if you can't fold straight this way? You can go over here. Sometimes that's a little bit more comfortable to fold over the knee rather than over the shin. And then if you'd like that full pigeon, you can send this leg behind you or turn your body a little bit on your mat and then send that leg back. I'm going to stay with the modified version on both sides. And rolling on your back for figure 4 is good. The ankle crosses over the thigh and you pull the knees up toward your chest. All right. We've got under 2 minutes to go, maybe about 1 minute 50 seconds to hold this side. And with these longer stretches, it's a good idea not to push to your edge right at the beginning. You just want to gradually ease into the edge of that stretch. So maybe for the first couple breaths, you're just taking it where you just start the stretch, start to feel the stretch, and then you begin to sink a little deeper. And speaking of sinking deeper, you can use the sinking breath as well, which is to inhale and then exhale twice as long as your in-breath. So it's a very slow exhalation. Just notice, is there any place in your body where you're carrying tension right now? Sometimes we get into a stretch and then we start to clench our teeth together, or we furrow our brow a little bit. So just try to relax everything. Another area we often tense is the upper shoulders and the trapezius. So just relax the neck and shoulders. And of course, if you need to come out of the pose sooner, that's great. Or if you're watching later on YouTube, you can pause the video and hold as long as you like. Let's take a look, see where we are. Oh, just a little over 30 seconds to go. So just thinking ahead as we're finishing this stretch, we're going to be transitioning to laying on our back. So let's take one more breath in together. Exhale, and then begin to transition to laying on your back. And get yourself nice and comfortable. We'll be there for a bit, and we'll be working on that pendulum swing one more time. So there's a couple of different ways we can do this. So we can keep the left foot on the floor and just bring the right knee up. So again, this leg is not going to move as we slightly let the heel go out and in. Now this is really difficult to rotate the leg in this position. It's going to be a very small movement. You can also bring both legs up. This is going to be more challenging on the core, but it gives you a visual of if you're doing this correctly. You don't want to let the leg go out, so that's the hard part. Bring it in, bring it in. We're just trying to rotate. You can also place your left foot up on a chair to stabilize it there. And let's go out and in one more time. And come back to the center line. If your left foot is up, put it down on the floor. Bring that right knee in closer to the chest and see if you can do a half happy baby. So what we want to do is take the right arm to the inside of the right knee and try to reach up to the outside of your right foot and pull that knee down towards the outside of the shoulder. If that's not accessible for you to grab the foot, you can use a yoga strap to help you, or you can just take your hands, bring them behind your thigh and try to pull that knee down toward the armpit. Your left leg can also straighten down. So this is very much like dragon, and even a little bit like humble warrior. So it's kind of a progression of these poses that we've been doing today. And just a couple more breaths on this side. Okay, release that stretch. The right foot can come down to the floor. The left knee will come up for our little pendulum swing. So you're looking at your leg straight on. You can even kind of hold it in place. And then you're just going to swing the heel out and then across the body a little bit. Rotate out and across. Right knee can be up in tabletop, and that gives you a vantage point to see, oh, I am doing this because I see my left heel coming in and my left heel going out, but the space between my knees is the same. And actually using a yoga block or a little ball between your knees on this one works really good as well. A little pillow between your knees so you know your knee isn't going out and in. It's coming from your hip. Couple more. Real small movement. All right, come back to neutral. Bring that left knee more toward your chest. Set your right foot down. And let's see if we can get half happy baby here. So the left arm comes to the inside of the knee, but we reach to the outside of the foot and we pull that knee down toward the outside of the shoulder or the armpit. Or we can just hug it right in here or loop your yoga strap around your foot and pull it down that way. And then we can take this right leg and send it all the way out if that feels okay for you. Ooh, that hip is really tight for me on that side today. Just go where you can. So this is our reclined dragon, half happy baby. The names are different depending on which style of yoga you happen to be doing. So the dragon comes from yin. Half happy baby is just a westernized term for a hatha yoga pose. Let's take a couple more breaths here. And then release that happy baby. Set the left foot back down onto the floor. And then the right foot comes to the floor as well. We're going to press up into a baby bridge. So press into all four corners of the feet. Start to lift the hips up. Tightening up the glutes. And we're trying to open up the front of the hips here. Now just focusing on your own bridge, either remaining as you are, just holding steady, or you can roll down and up, or you can march your bridge by picking up one foot and then the other. So I just want you to take about a minute's time on your own to do what you feel like your body needs the most here in this bridge pose. And maybe try some bucket handle breathing up in bridge. I don't think I've tried that. Oh yeah, that's nice. Seems like a good place to try to practice that style of breathing. And just maybe one or two more deep breaths. Bring yourself down from that bridge. Hug the knees up toward the chest. And then we're going to do a bit of a clamshell action. So the knees will close to start, your feet are together, and then keep your feet together as you open both knees out and as you close. Now, the closer your knees are toward your body, the easier this is for your core and your lower back. So if you want to start with your knees pretty close up toward you, that's great. And then if you feel like you can manage a little bit more work in your abs, just send your knees away from your body and then try it again from here. Now, if you start to feel your lower back arch away from the floor or any pain in your lower back, bring your knees back in toward you. So again, we can go a little further away. Ooh, that's really challenging. Feet stay together. We open and close. Maybe a bucket handle breath as you open, flaring the ribs, funneling in as you close the knees. Two more clamshells. And then we'll set our feet down. Let the knees open away from each other, the soles of the feet to connect into our Supta Baddha Konasana, relaxing through the hips. And if the lower back's not in agreement with this, maybe it would feel better to roll over and sit up and do this in a seated position. So you can remain on your back or you can follow me and roll over and sit up, allowing the soles of the feet to connect and the knees to open. So again, I'm going to give you about a minute's time here just to relax and breathe, focus on what you need on this pose. If you're sitting up, you might hinge forward, stretching through that lower back. Make a connection back with your breathing. And maybe you'd like to switch back to a belly breath. It's a nice calming breathing pattern for the end of class, for relaxation. So if you're on your back in Supta Baddha Konasana, you can remain there if you'd like, or you can join me seated for our last few breaths. Just focusing in on our hips, noticing how we're feeling, maybe on the hands. You could even do some close and open here. And then as we're seated, we'll take arms out to the side, a nice full inhale, reaching up.